Let me know if this sounds familiar to you. You think along this journey that you maybe screwed up somehow. You screwed up with your maybe not with your diet, or maybe you did something bad, right? Something wrong in general. Not doesn't necessarily have to be nutrition related or diet related. Um, but you do something wrong, or that you classify as wrong, and you think this person must hate me. Like, how do I tell them? Oh God, like, oh, they're going to be so mad at me. They're going to be so frustrated. They're going to be disappointed at me. Oh God, I don't want to tell them. They're going to hate me when they find out. And so you try to avoid this certain person because you think that they're going to judge you, or you think they're going to be mad at you, only for you to eventually tell them. And they're like, okay, cool. And they're not mad at you. They're not frustrated. They don't judge you. The situation wasn't that bad, and you let out this sigh of relief, and you just realized that you were nervous for nothing. Like, oh God, why was I so anxious about that? Like, oh, that wasn't too bad, right? And this happens all the time, and you realize that you were nervous for no reason. And you're beating yourself up over this false narrative, this false story that you created in your head. This is just one of many branches of something called pessimism bias, where even if things are not as bad as you tell yourself they are, which they usually aren't, it's a defense mechanism. And because it's easier to think negatively and to be skeptical and pessimistic, it's easier to think that you won't be successful, that you're not going to succeed because, hey, if you're wrong, cool. But if you're right, see, I told you so. And it simply confirms this internal belief that you have. And it's this false kind of no lose way of thinking that we sort of default to. It's really easy to justify and rationalize in your own mind. And it makes sense. And it makes it really easy to fall back on what most people are currently doing, which is nothing. Like, most people are doing nothing. And then they justify those outcomes no matter if it's good or bad, which almost always leads to some sort of negative outcome. And this goes back to the idea of that I talk about all the time, that thoughts drive feelings, which lead to actions and behaviors to reinforce those beliefs and thoughts that you initially had. And from an evolutionary standpoint, this makes perfect sense. Like, because it's better to be alert for danger and potential negative threats. Like, if you're going out with a hunting party and you're walking through the woods and there's a noise in a bush, if you don't act like there might be a tiger in that bush, and then you walk by that bush and there's a tiger in it, guess what? You're dead. You're eaten. So it actually makes perfect sense that your brain is wired to focus on everything it can perceive as a threat, everything that it can perceive as a stress or some sort of negative experience. It's important that our brain works that way. If it's crucial for survival. Because if you don't, then the potential of death goes up, right? But in the context of the modern world, this line of thinking is actually making us fat. It's making us lazy, weak, sick. We're dying younger. We're in chronic pain. And some people only poop once every 3 days, or they gain weight. They blame their hormones and they're unable to just navigate modern living. So now we're stuck in this endless cycle of never try, never fail, which simultaneously being extremely easy to justify and rationalize these behaviors. I sent an email out last week saying, what you rationalize persists. Um, and there's a quote: we often suffer in our own minds more than we ever do in reality. And this is why I'm a really big fan of writing down your wins. I talk a lot about journaling, and I usually talk about two specific questions in general, like, what are you feeling and why are you feeling this way? But another thing that I really like to do is to write down the things that go well, specifically aim to look for the positive, look for the evidence that things are going your way. It's really easy to sit down and get in a dark, deep depression rabbit hole if you're only ever looking at the bleakness of day to day. And again, our brains are wired to defend the negative, to fixate on the negative, to focus on all the bad things going on in our life. But the brain can be trained. The subconscious mind can be reprogrammed. Your brain is like a supercomputer that runs on the internal programming that you feed it, right? So you can rewire your brain to focus on the good things. So something that I talk about with my clients a lot are at the end of each day, write down your wins for that day. Every single day. Start with 1 to 3, and as you get better, you might be able to add more, but fixate on things that go well. What went well today? What are 3 things that went well today? Things like, I mean, and if you can't think of any, remember, you woke up. You took a breath. Like that is like the biggest win you could possibly come up with, right? And it's at the end of the day, if you can't think of any, just start there, right? Because if you're a parent, I love using parents as example. I'm about to become a parent, so this will be really relevant for me as well. But in general, you woke up today. You get another opportunity to live your best life with your child. You get another opportunity to be like, you know what? I'm going to show my son or daughter what it's like to overcome obstacles, what it's like to overcome struggle. That to me sounds amazing. That sounds incredible. That sounds exactly like the kind of thing that is healthy, right? And so if that's the only win you could think of, that's a really big win. That's literally the biggest win you could possibly think of. Like, but it could be anything. It could be something as small as, you know what? You had just enough toothpaste to get you through the day, and you're going shopping tomorrow, so it's that so you can pick more up. Or you had enough toilet paper to last the week. Oh, thank God, because that would be really awkward, right? It could be something as simple as I said no to the donut. Finally, I've never done that before, and I managed to say no. That's incredible. Another thing involving that is I said yes to the donut and I didn't feel guilty about it. It could be something as simple as I hit every green light on the way to work today. I managed to get my water in. I took a 5-minute walk today. Like, no matter how small, they all count, but it's important to start training your brain to focus on those things because they are everywhere. And at the end of the day, you can make light of almost any situation. Any experience that you have can turn into a negative or a positive, because there's no such thing as a good or bad experience. There's just the experience. It comes down to you, the individual, to that places a label on that experience as either good or bad. No matter what it is, you can find something. But here's a trick that you can use to rewrite any situation, right? Imagine as a parent, and I imagine this is going to be fun for me to, this is obviously a struggle because we hate seeing our children in pain. But imagine you're a parent. How do you develop patience in a child? You probably wouldn't give them everything they want right away. You'd probably wait. You'd make them wait and hold on to that desire and learn patience. Well, how do you make them tough? Well, you probably don't solve all their problems for them. You let them figure out their own problems and struggles. And you let them learn that. The thing is that they probably throw a tantrum in the moment, and it might kill you to see them in pain. But you also know that it is critical that they learn these lessons if they want to thrive as adults. So imagine that you are the child and life is the parent. Ask yourself the question: how might this currently perceived negative situation benefit you in the future? What's the lesson you can learn? What's the positive you can take in this situation? I'm going to use the, like, what did not go your way that led to this outcome? What can you do later to avoid this outcome in the future? And how can you do just a little bit better next time? I'm going to use the most extreme example I have in my life, which is when I found my mom's body after she passed away. Easily, I could fixate on that, and that is easily the most negative thing that could have ever happened to me, and it still is. But the positive that can come from it is the fact that it's now the reason I'm having this conversation with you. It's the reason why I'm even making this video. Because if that hadn't happened, if my mom didn't have the health issues that she had, if my mom didn't go through what she did, which led to her outcome, which then led to me using that as my driving force behind what I do, why I do what I do, why I fixate so much on women's health, why I fixate so much on improving women's health and women's bodies in the way that supports their life, so that they can be there for their children in the long run, so that they can actually be there and create these more impactful memories with the ones that matter most in their life. My mom passed away when she was 48 years old. That's so young. Right? So there's, no matter how bad the situation is, you can always find something positive from it. So ask yourself, imagine that you are the child and life is your parent. What challenge that you're currently going through, what's the key takeaway from this moment that you can use to grow as a person? Questions matter. And if you don't ask them, you're going to keep spinning your wheels on this endless cycle that keeps you stuck. You're going to keep responding emotionally, beating yourself up and staying in this pessimism biased way of thinking. And as you're going through this, we're talking about automatic negative thoughts, right? Your ants, as we can call them. And remember, how you feel is a response to your thoughts. And if the thoughts that you're having are wrong, then how you feel is a lie anchored on something that's not real. Right? So we often get caught up thinking that just because I think something that it is true, right? The thought that I had must be true. And a lot of times we never stop to actually question these thoughts. And therefore the beliefs we have, the feelings we have that are associated with those thoughts then end up in this negative outcome that doesn't serve us. Just because you feel something doesn't always make it true. And, we used to always think that everything we think and feel is deeply significant. We used to believe that thoughts are like an iceberg, that like what we feel are deeply planted in our subconscious and are meant to be explored. And while some of that might work that way, for the most part, it's actually something else entirely. Aaron Beck, a famous psychologist, realized, because he was a therapist, many of his patients were spouting negative thoughts and feelings that weren't even true. Like I said earlier, a lot of people cause their own unhappiness based on inaccuracies created by the stories they tell themselves. Like I talked about earlier at the beginning of this video, was we create stories in our head and then that makes us feel a certain way. We literally created lies in our head that weren't true. And we created our reality and lived our life based on that understanding, even though the thing that we understood was fundamentally false. So what if we actually battled our own thoughts and smashed those ants, smashed those automatic negative thoughts? Like, what if we actually take a step back and think critically about our thoughts and behaviors, about ourselves? Most people don't do this. Most people don't reflect on themselves. Most people just kind of live life on autopilot the same day again and again and again, and think that what they're doing is fine, that they're okay, that nothing is going wrong. But what if we actually stopped and challenged ourselves? And this is hard. This is us literally looking in the mirror and saying, hey, you might be wrong. And no one wants to be wrong. No one wants to admit that maybe the things that they are doing, the way they think is flawed. No one wants to admit that. That's hard. One of the ways we can do this is just actively acknowledge that that's just what they are. They're automatic negative thoughts. They happen automatically on autopilot. They're automatic and negative. And you can just let that go. So think critically, like ask yourself, are the thoughts that I'm having a little too black and white? Because the brain loves to compartmentalize and to conserve energy, right? The story that I'm telling myself right now, is it actually true or am I just imagining it? Am I just creating it? Is the thought that I'm having actually true? Example, I step on the scale bumped up. Did I actually screw up? A lot of people believe yes. A lot of people they'll lose a bunch of weight, they'll step on the scale and it'll bump up 1 or 2 pounds, sometimes 3, and they'll hit the panic button. And because they're like, oh God, I screwed up. What did I do? Oh God, what did I do wrong? I thought I did everything. I thought I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing. Now the scale's up, so I must have screwed up somehow. So I hit the panic button because I screwed up. So I'm just going to keep screwing up, get it all out of the way now, enjoy my life while I can, and then I'll just start over again on Monday. But if we actually stop and ask ourselves, is this actually true? Did I actually screw up? And think back, take a step back. Think yesterday, the day before. Did I stick to the plan? If the answer is yes, then you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you didn't screw anything up. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. So is that true? Is my thought true? Because my thought is I screwed up. Therefore, I feel like a failure. And then you're going to go and act like how you feel, right? Because you want to reinforce your feelings and thoughts, because that's how the subconscious works. It always looks to reaffirm your beliefs, your thoughts and beliefs, right? So if you are sitting there and you do a thing and you think a certain way, you're then going to feel a certain way and then act in accordance to those things. But if the thought you have was false, then it does. Then of course it's going to go the wrong way. Of course it's going to go automatically negative. But if you actually stop and ask yourself, is this true? And it turns out it's not, well, then now you can make a better decision instead of responding to the negativity that automatically comes its way, right? The human brain is wired to fixate on the negative and to plan for the worst. So we're not taken off guard when the worst comes to reality, right? 10,000 years ago, it was battling other tribes, looking out for lions, bears, mammoths, tigers, and other predators. But now it's social situations. Oh, that person must hate me. They're going to be mad at me. But do they really? How do you know? How do you know that this is true? How many times have you talked yourself into being afraid of any given situation only to realize it was not as bad as you thought? Everyone has done that. And more than 90% of our decisions are based on how we feel. But if how we feel is often anchored in falsehood, would it not make sense to stop and verify the accuracy of our thoughts and beliefs and our feelings before actually making a decision? Like if you suffer from binge eating or disordered eating behaviors, when was the last time that happened based on a logical decision and not an in the moment emotional or stressful response? It's always emotion. It's always the emotions, our feelings that trigger an action. So if we feel like a failure, we're going to go and act like it. But here's the thing, you have complete control over your inner dialogue and actions that follow. Your actions are 100% in your control. Thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions, and actions reinforce your thoughts. So if all you think is, I can't this, I can't that, I can't because of this, I don't have enough time, X, Y, Z, and the other thing, and you don't stop to audit your own thoughts and beliefs, eventually you're just going to prove yourself right. Not because you want to be right, you desperately want to be wrong in some situations, but it's the law of attraction. If you think negative thoughts, you're going to feel that negativity and it's going to bleed out into the rest of the world, and your subconscious mind will make you act in accordance with those thoughts and feelings, even if they're wrong. It's a protective mechanism. And as the saying goes, misery loves company. Your brain and nervous system would rather exist in a familiar hell than an unfamiliar heaven. Your mind and your nervous system would rather exist in a familiar hell than an unfamiliar heaven. This is why people always justify and make excuses. And this is why people are so pessimistic. This is why people always rationalize shitty decisions and shitty behaviors, because the subconscious mind thinks change is a threat. And so if you think, if you try to go and be healthy, your subconscious mind goes, no, this is scary. I don't know what the result's going to be, and therefore I don't want to do this. When you believe something is true, you'll always find evidence for it. So if you think, oh, I can't do it because XYZ, and you believe that's true, then you will always find evidence for it to support that belief, always. This is why there's that saying of whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. Because the brain will always find evidence for that belief. It's called your reticular activating system, something I've talked about briefly. I plan on doing an entire live training on your RAS. So I'm just going to do a little test. Like, look. Here's something I want you to do. Look around the room right now and take in everything in your room that is the color brown. Whatever it is that's around you, take a couple seconds and find everything brown in your room. For me, I see my desk, I see chairs, I see coffee table, I see another chair over there. I see the back of my whiteboard. Now close your eyes. And I want you to tell me everything that you saw that's red. Now, obviously, you saw a lot more brown, didn't you? Why? Because you're looking for it. So now open your eyes and go look for red. Anything that you can find that's red. Did you find more red this time? Of course, because you're looking for it. Once you develop a belief, you will always find evidence to support it. Always. Here's where the brain will trick you. It's that you're going to find stuff that's not even there in order to reinforce that belief. Because I bet that when you were looking around the room for brown, you found something beige and called it brown in order to find more brown, or maroon or burgundy just to call it red. So you believe you screwed up, messed up, or can't do it, not worthy. I can't because of this, that, and the other thing. I'm not the type of person. I guess I'm a failure, XYZ. You're going to find and color yourself that way. Whether it's true or not, you're going to think it's true for you. Whatever you believe is self-evident. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But you have the ability to take in information and respond, to analyze and respond instead of react. When something happens, you can choose to pause, analyze, think, and respond. It is your responsibility to take control of your thoughts and beliefs. It's not easy, but it is necessary. And I'm a firm believer that if you're not changing it, you're choosing it. If something happens, then if something negative happens and you take note of that, but then don't change a thing about yourself, about your day-to-day, about your actions, then you're just going to repeat the same thing. And if you keep it on repeat, it's a choice. But that's the thing about the automatic negative thoughts, is that they'll always come in and bring you back and self-sabotage. And this is where a lot of people go, oh yeah, but like I'm scared. Like I'm afraid that if I try, I'll fail. That's good. You should be afraid of taking risks and pursuing something meaningful. But you should be more afraid of staying where you are if it's making you miserable and leading you down a dark path. Like we all know what happens. We all have parents that are in old folks' homes, or grandparents that have been old folks' homes that are unhappy. They're weak and frail. We all know somebody that fell and break their hip. We all know somebody that retired and then died a couple of years later because they weren't taking care of themselves, or people that are just absolutely miserable in their older years and hate themselves, hate what they see looking in the mirror. Like, you're paying the price already by staying there doing nothing. Like I said, misery loves company, and doing nothing is still a choice. No decision is a decision. And if you're miserable now, if you're miserable now and change nothing, then in 5 years, you're just going to be more miserable because you're going to be living more with the problems that you had, that the problems then also get worse. The most common thing that the elderly people say when they're dying is not that they regret the decision they made, but the decision that they didn't make. If you wait 5 years, you'll be a lot more miserable with a lot less time and energy to do something about it, and with 5 less years to actually enjoy it. There is no perfect time. The perfect time to start is right now. So take imperfect action, take messy action before. Otherwise, it just gets compounds, it just gets worse. Right? So that's my advice to you today, is learn to analyze yourself. Learn to take in a thought, and before you respond to those thoughts, to analyze it. Ask yourself the question, is this true? And while you're questioning yourself, challenging your own thoughts and beliefs, every single day, write down your wins. What went well today? What did I do well today? Do not follow it up with, but then I did this. Had to have a stern talk with a client recently where I said, hey, what are 3 wins for the day? And she went, oh, I did this. This was awesome. But then I did this and I felt really bad about myself. Don't do that. You're literally training your brain to dismiss the positive in favor of the negative. Don't do that. Write down your positives. What went well today? Give me 3 wins for the day. Doesn't matter what it is, but start training your brain to find the positive. And over time, this just becomes a part of your regular, everyday life, part of who you are. So, journal, write down your wins. While you're doing that, I challenge you to challenge yourself, not just physically. Like in this challenge that I'm running inside the Facebook group right now, it's a challenge of doing things. But I also want to challenge your thoughts. I want you to challenge yourself from an internal standpoint, not just external. So, with that being said, that's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye bye.